Hello, everybody. Thank you. Somebody responded. My name is Mark Ross. Welcome to Amplify Your User Experience with Lightning and Flow. First, of course, we have to lead with the forward-looking statement. Please don't make any business decisions, purchasing decisions based on the things you see here. I am just a lowly person here to talk about Flow. But again, my name is Mark Ross. I'm the Salesforce Practice Director at Claris Group, a consulting group based out of Kansas City. If you have any questions about anything, you can find me at any of these locations here, email or Twitter. I am more happy to help as I can. But let's go ahead and launch into what we're going to talk about today. First, a real quick primer for anybody who needs a quick refresher on what Flow is. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Lightning Runtime. We'll talk about embedding your flows into Lightning, and then we'll talk about embedding Lightning into your flows. And then at the end, we'll have time, hopefully, for some questions. So, real quick, what is Flow? If you're not familiar with it, it is a tool that is available in Salesforce for configuration. It is clicks, not code. And it is kind of like a flow chart, like a Visio chart, right? Except it actually does stuff, right? It can actually do data queries, create records, update records, delete records, make much more complicated logical decisions, all in that one flowchart. And you may be thinking, hey, that sounds a little bit like Process Builder, but there's one key difference that we're actually going to focus on a lot here today, and this is the fact that in Flow we can have screens. Flow used to be called visual workflow, and the reason for that is because it had this visual layer. It had the ability to actually say, here, we need to ask some questions of the user or present the user with some information in some fashion, and then based on that, we can do different things. So in Flow, we can actually say, all right, well, they chose this for this pick list entry. They chose A, so we're going to go create a task. Unless they choose B, and then we're not going to create the task, we're going to create an opportunity instead. So we can do all sorts of branching logic based on the input that the users are actually giving, rather than just some sort of preconceived set of logic and structure. So, looking at this, however, it's not the prettiest, is it? It's a little bit cluttered, kind of hard to see which labels go to which fields. It's not very modern. It's not very Lightning. And so one of the things that you're going to want to do in your orgs is something called the Lightning Runtime. The Lightning Runtime is something you can turn on in any org, even in Classic. Don't have to be in Lightning to turn on the Lightning Runtime, despite the name. Don't let it fool you. And when you do, it will make your flows look like that. Ooh. Ah. So much nicer. And thank you for the audience participation. I didn't even ask for it. That's engagement. So yes, that is something that you definitely want to turn on. Some of the features that we're going to talk about today, not all of them, will actually be available to you in Classic if you have the Lightning Runtime turned on. Something to keep in mind. I do suggest trying to go to Lightning when you can. It is the way in the future. However, just know that Lightning Runtime is your very first stop on the road to Lightning. Now, how do you turn that on exactly? It's very simple. All you have to do is go to Setup, you search for Process Automation Settings, and once you arrive there, you've got this checkbox right there. All you got to do is check that, hit Save, and your Lightning Runtime is on. There's no real reason you shouldn't do this. If you have some really complicated flows that are embedded into Visualforce pages that are altering the CSS, okay, turning on the Lightning Runtime may actually mess with those somewhat. But that's really the only case where that's going to be an issue at all. Most users, most admins should be turning that on as soon as possible if you have not already. And it will make your flows look like Lightning even when you're still in Classic. So that's the first thing. Now let's talk about actually putting Flow into Lightning components, right? Starts off looking a little bit like this. This is a record page, right? You have your header at the top, you have your activity bar on the right, but embedded in it, that is a flow. It is on the page. The users are actually seeing that. They didn't have to click a button. They didn't have to do anything else. We just have a flow presented to them with the rest of the account, right? So this gives them the opportunity to answer questions, get things served to them, data served to them that they wouldn't ordinarily have had easy access to, and otherwise, create records, update records, all those sorts of things without having to click anything else, right? So some really good power there. This will run every time the page loads. And you don't need to write anything. This is entirely clicks, not code. It's just a matter of dragging, when you're making a Lightning page, you have the ability to actually drag onto Lightning components onto the Lightning page. You select the flow component, you drag it on, and then you choose which flow. That's all there is to it. It's very simple. So let's take a look at something like this in action. Today I'm going to give you some use cases as well. So hopefully you are leaving here with more than just a conceptual idea of how this is going to work. You might actually go home with some ideas for your org that you could implement for your users, hopefully. So first off, we have here, this is a normal contact page. And on the right side, we have an opportunity creation form, right? Got all the normal stuff you'd need, required fields, opportunity name, close date, amount, type, and even has the ability to let them choose a product and create an opportunity product at the same time. The flow, when you run this, will create the opportunity based on the information that is entered. If they select to choose a product, it will also create the product, right? And they don't have to leave the account page. Your salespeople will love you because you took 2 clicks away, but they will still love you, right? Because that saves a lot of their time and angst. Another demo we have here, let's go ahead and take a look at an opportunity. So this is a standard opportunity, but I have on here a flow that you can't actually see yet. So some managers you may work with, they may have some high demands. They may want to know what their salespeople, or maybe it's not sales managers, maybe it's just managers in general. They want to know what their people are doing exactly. They want to know what opportunities they are looking at, what cases they are looking at, right? We don't have a good way in Salesforce of doing that. If you have event monitoring, you can see some things, but generally not a record view, right? A log of who looked at what. So I made it. I'm going to click on this Notes tab. We'll say, well, we want to track every time somebody goes and looks at the notes on an opportunity. And voila, we just had a flow run. Did you see it? It was super fast. You didn't see it. And that's because when we actually go and look at the page itself, there is a flow there, right there. It has a screen. The screen has nothing in it, right? This only runs when you actually click on that Notes tab. The moment that flow is viewed, it runs that flow. Nobody sees anything. There's no evidence that it happened except for our view logs. I refresh. Here we go. There it is, 12:37 p.m. just now. Create a record. There's the ID that they went to and who did it and what time. So now we have an ongoing record of who has actually gone to that, who has looked at notes on an opportunity, right? The moment I clicked on that tab, that's when it ran. And it didn't run before then at all. All right. Another one we have on the opportunity level. Let's say we have a business rule. The business rule is that you cannot proceed past a certain point without an approval on your opportunity. Fairly standard. We see that a lot in sales organizations. There's no place to request approval on this right here. But it's at the proposal that we want to stop it. We don't want to allow them to go to proposal until we get that approval. So once we arrive at the stage before that, at perception analysis, all of a sudden, boom, we have a flow that shows up. We're using the dynamic Lightning component visibility on Lightning pages. We have the ability to say now on the Lightning page, only show this when X criteria is met. In this case, when the stage is equal to perception analysis, then show this component. And so now we're showing this, and it says, well, we can't go any further. We need next steps filled in. You can't actually go to your next steps. So let me go ahead, put in some next steps. We'll have to hit refresh. There we go. The flow ran and checked and saw, okay, yes, we do have the next steps. So you can click ready for approval. That next button will continue to go in the flow. It will run the action to submit for approval. And in this way, I am governing, I am ensuring that they have to go down this path in order to submit for approval. I've done this before where I've actually had fields on the flow, and they could not proceed until they'd filled in all the fields. And that is when they could actually proceed with their approvals. Because right now, approvals in the system, if you have some criteria set up, they're never going to know that until they hit submit for approval. And it will just, nothing will happen if they don't meet your criteria. This actually gives them some visibility. It says, hey, you need to do this, this, and this before you can submit for approval, and that's why it's not going to work if you don't have it. All right, moving on. Flow in its own tab. So previously this was possible, but it was possible by creating a Visualforce page and embedding the flow in the Visualforce page and then making your Visualforce page your tab. In Lightning, we don't have to do that. We can actually create a dedicated page that has a flow embedded without the whole Visualforce side whatsoever. What you're going to want to do is go to the Lightning App Builder in your setup. Not App Manager, that's different, App Builder. You've got to be very specific about that. And you click New to create a new Lightning page. And it'll ask you what type you want to do. And this time you pick App Page. It's not a home page. It's not an actual record for an object. You are just creating a page just for the flow and the flow alone. Once you've done that and you've saved your page, you're ready to go. When you activate it, it lets you choose what apps, and I don't mean apps as in the apps we were just talking about. I mean apps as in a collection of tabs that go across the top of the page. It lets you choose which of those you want to add it to. One more thing you can do. We can do flows now in mobile because any of those tabs that you create can now also become mobile tabs or mobile menu selections as well. And so you can have a flow that runs in your mobile client just the same as it would from its own tab in the desktop version. So let's take a look at some of this in action. OK, so up here at the top, we have a tab, and it says Time Clock. If I click on this, it is going to load up a page. And this page has two things. One is the flow on the left-hand side. On the right is a list view. It's just showing me a list of time clock records. I've created an object to log each and every time somebody clocks in and clocks out. So if I actually click Next, that's my clock in. I hit refresh. And it created a record. There it is. What time I checked in, what date, it is there. I can go do my work. I'm ready to go to lunch now, so I need to clock out. I click on Next. And there we go. Now I have a timeout. And I could have gone to any other tab. I could have done all sorts of work. I just have to come back to that time log tab. And now I can run my flow to create the time log record, to update the time log record, to find the correct one, to find the most recent one that doesn't have a timeout option on it, doesn't have timeout filled in, and then finish that record off. And it doesn't just work here. It works in mobile as well. Here we go. Right here, this is what you would see in a mobile environment. This is my iPad emulator up here. I can just click on Time Clock, and voila. There we go. And it works exactly the same as it did before. All right. So now let's talk about actions. If you're not too familiar with Lightning yet, actions are a new thing. They're kind of like buttons, except they generally have predefined fields, kind of like a little form you can fill out. However, we now have the option of, instead of giving them a field to fill out, we can say, don't present the little tiny page layout with fields. Instead, give them a flow, right? So we can actually have the ability to have this. As you can see, this find account. That is a button, but it's actually an action. It just looks like a button, right? When you're creating any sort of action, you'll do that by going to the object, and there'll be a section called Buttons, Links, and Actions. You go to that, say New Action, and this is what you will choose. You can go down to Flow, and after you've done that, you just select which flow you want. Now, something you have to keep in mind if you're going to be making these, and that is that once you have selected your flow, there is no way to manually determine your input variables. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry. I apologize. However, there is one thing you can do, and that is to name one variable in your system, in your flow, record ID. Case sensitive, capital I, everything else lowercase. You have to get it exactly right. If there is a variable in your flow that is called that, your flow actions will automatically recognize that as the input variable. And the input variable from the record you are coming from. It will pass in the ID of the record you're coming from. So you have to have that if you want to have any sort of context in your flows. All right, let's take a look at how this works. So here we have an account, and up at the top here I have a button, Quick Op. That sounds familiar. That's exactly the same flow that we had running on the contact earlier. Let's see what happens when we click it. So you see what it did there. This opened up what's called a modal. A modal is when you have a window that pops up, but it pops up without a new tab or without a new browser window. It's just popping up over the top of your existing window and grays out everything in the back. That's a modal. You'll hear that term a lot. And what it's doing is it's presenting that flow for people to fill in. Now, please notice something here. What happened? It automatically filled out some information, didn't it? It automatically put in the account name and automatically put in close date. Did anybody here make URL hack buttons? Yeah? Anybody here make URL hack buttons where you went to the new record page and manually passed in your variables? Okay, I see a couple. Yeah, okay. And you know how that's gone in Lightning? It's back. What you do, instead of passing it, because you can't pass in a bunch of variables, right? You pass in your one record ID, but then in your flow, you can go and get the other pieces of information you need and pre-fill anything that you would have had to manually do otherwise. Anything you can automatically fill in to make your salespeople's or your support people's lives easier, you can do that now because the flow will let you do all that, get the records, go do the math to say, okay, today plus 30, that's the close date. Like you can set all of that and put those in as default field values on your flow screen. And there you go. We have our functionality again. One other thing we have here on this page, this is a Lightning component that got added relatively recently. It's called the accordion component. And it's really hard to describe what it does, so I'm just going to demo it here. I have a couple of flows in here. If I click on Quick Op, there we go. There's my Quick Op flow. If I click on Find Account, there's my Find Account flow. See what it's doing? It's collapsing the others. Or if I click on Forms, it collapses all of them. So this is a way that you can give access to a lot of flows very quickly for the user to determine, okay, I need this, okay, I need this now, okay, I need this now, and let them determine when they need to use what without even needing a button click. Just collapse everything into a tiny space. All right. Oh, nope, I skipped around. One of the things that we want to make sure of is, of course, that we can do these actions in mobile as well. Right? Actions are a thing in mobile. There's little buttons at the bottom that do your new note, your new event, your new task. Those are all called actions, right? And we can use those in your mobile client as well. So here's a use case. We have a quote. The quote is ready to go. However, we have a little bit of complication. In our system, there is a workflow rule. The workflow rule says when the quote is accepted, go update the opportunity with the required information. But remember, we had a problem with the opportunity. It wanted you to have next steps filled in before it would let you to proceed. So what's going to happen if I actually go ahead and move this to accepted right off the bat? There we go. It bombs out, and there's my error. You must enter next steps in order to update this. If I'm on a mobile client, that's going to stink, right? Because from that mobile client, I now have to go back to my opportunity, enter my next steps again, hit save, go back to the quote, then do this again, right? And on a mobile client, that's a lot of mobile load times. It's not the same as having a wired computer that you're sitting at, right? You're at the behest of your coverage. So how do we rectify this? Well, there's a little action I have here at the bottom, and it is a next step. It's a bit hard to read, but this says next steps. Now, if I click on this, it's just running a flow. I'm running a flow in a mobile environment, and all it's doing is saying, hey, can you put in your next steps? So if I go ahead and put those in and hit next, that will save them, and then from the mobile client, I've met with this customer. I've been talking with them. From the mobile, I can say, all right, he's accepted this. I hit save, and it's saved. It's good, because those next steps got entered on the other side on the opportunity by this cross-object flow running out of mobile. Cross-object data entry from mobile. All right. So now let's talk a bit about the utility bar. Utility bar is something you can add on any of the apps, and by apps I mean the collection of tabs at the top of the screen. You can add this to any app you have in Salesforce. They're originally designed for Service Console, but they can be used anywhere. And it lets you have some things like, this is a common one that I usually do. I have recent items. It literally shows you like the 10 most recent items that you visited, or your most recent notes. Like I typically put those on any given org I'm setting up, right? But you can run a flow in that utility bar as well. So from the app manager, this is where you actually affect those collection of tabs up at the top. You go and you find the app you're talking about, and then you find the utility bar selection on the left side, you choose that, and then look right there, we've got one that says flow. We just select that, and we enter in the flow. And what does this look like exactly? Well, here we are in a Service Console. I've got it enabled, and down here at the bottom, here's my utility bar. Time clock, that sounds familiar. Look at that. It even recognized that I clicked clock in. They remembered that because the record is still there. I saved a record with clock in but not a clock out. It went and found that and said, okay, well now I'm running this. I see that you don't have a clock out. So hey, you successfully clocked in. Here's when you did. Clock out. I can do that from anywhere as long as I have that in the utility bar. So I don't even have to click on that tab. All right. So now let's talk about putting Lightning components in flow. It's a little bit different. And I'm not talking about this guy. That's for the fans. But I'm talking about this. Components are not necessarily what you think they are, because we think of a Lightning component as something that you could drag and drop into a Lightning page, and it's a block of stuff, right? That's not entirely the case. Lightning components are more like a vehicle. A tire is a component. It's a component of the car, right? It is a piece of the car. However, that tire has multiple pieces as well. It has the rim. It has the tire. It has the little screwy thing that you put on the place where you put in air. I'm not a car person. All those are also components as well. And this is exactly the same idea that we have in Lightning. There's something called base Lightning components. They are still Lightning components, just the same, but they are these little pieces that cannot be broken down any further. Things like icons, spinners, drop-downs, paths. These are all single things that can be added onto a Lightning component that is a block and a collection of other Lightning components. These are what we can add to our flow. So how do we add them? Well, I have first off in Winter 19. Some of them are going to be added to your org. They are not there yet unless you have a Winter 19 sandbox, but there are some of these already in place. If you go to the Winter 19 release notes and search for flow screen components, you will see some of these that will be added. In addition, there is a page called lightningflow.net. Now this is bleeding edge stuff. This is a page that has been put up by a PM for Flow here at Salesforce, and it contains a number of Lightning components that you can download and add manually to your instance. Things to keep in mind, big warning caveat, if you do that, if you install any of the things from here, great, but the moment you need to update them, these are all unmanaged packages. The moment you need to update them, you will have to actually go to any flow that used it, take it out, save the version, go uninstall the package, download the new package, reinstall it, re-add it to your flow, and save again. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but you can get some really cool stuff by doing this. So I'm just letting you know so you're not coming back at me, curse that Mark Ross. He suggested I add a whole bunch of time to my day. All right, so let's take a look at some of these in action. So first off, I'm here on the home page. I've got a flow right here on the right side, and pay close attention. What do we have here? We have a field running in a flow that has a magnifying glass. A magnifying glass, people. You know what that is? That's a lookup field in a flow. For any of you who are new to Flow, you don't recognize how huge of a thing this is. It is ridiculous. We actually can do now, through this Lightning component, having a lookup field in your flow. And here's our flow. Boom. There's our going to the account in question. So that's big enough for me. That's absolutely huge. Something else, we're looking at this little flow here. We have this question here at the bottom. Do you have a product choice at this time? If I click on no, OK, nothing happens. If I click on yes, dynamically, it said, OK, well, then let's give them another question to figure out. So in Winter 19, we're getting something that is dependent pick lists, and it actually will use your dependent pick list architecture in the system. This is more of a go outside of the architecture, come up with your own questions sort of thing. But this is one of the things you can download from lightningflow.net. So some really cool, powerful stuff we can do with that. And those are just a couple of examples, too. Local actions. This is not the kind of local action we're talking about. I don't know if I'd buy this comic book. But local actions themselves are a little bit hard to visualize. So I'm going to try to describe it as best I can. A local action is something that runs in your flow that interacts with your browser. Unless that sounds vaguely boring, keep in mind that when it interacts with your browser, it can access your URLs, your tabs. It can even access anything through your intranet. If you have any databases that are on your closed internet or within a VPN that you want Salesforce to be able to access, you can actually have a flow run a local action that accesses the JavaScript on your browser and goes and fetches the data through the browser on your intranet. People have done this. This doesn't exist yet in production. It's just a theoretical possibility you can do if you know how to do that kind of crazy coding JavaScript stuff. So, again, you can get some of these from lightningflow.net. There are not yet any coming in Winter 19, but safe harbor, they are coming at some point. And one in particular, I think you will all enjoy. So let's take a look at these again. So I'm actually going to go back to my home screen. And I'm going to do this one more time, and I'd like you to pay attention. Watch exactly what is happening here. I'm going to click on Next. Look at the top. That's called a toast. That is a specific type of action. What it's doing is it's evoking JavaScript on your browser, and it is making that little pop-up occur. That's custom message I made. And you can do that depending on whatever you configure it with. You can configure it for success. It looks like that. If you put in failure, it puts it in as red, all sorts of things. So you can have these kind of pop-up messages. Also notice what I did. I went to a URL with a flow. Hang on a sec. I thought we used to have Visualforce pages for that. Right? If you wanted to create a record and then navigate to that record from Flow, that wasn't a thing. Well, now it is. This will actually let you do that without your Visualforce page. Let's take a look at what this flow actually looks like. So I have a couple of these. These are my local actions over here that I've installed. And there's one here. It says open SObject. SObject is just a fancy way of saying a record in Salesforce. And all I'm doing is passing in a single variable. You pass in any ID, unique record ID, into this local action, and it will go there. That's it. Doesn't matter what type of object it is, it will go there. Theoretically, it might work with admin pages. I haven't tried it yet. I just thought of that this morning. And then the toast is right here. This is another local action. All it's doing is saying, all right, the type is success, and here's the message. And you can get both of those from that lightningflow.net page. All right, one last thing we want to cover. Guided engagement. So this is something that newly arrived last release. And if anybody has worked in any sort of service environment, you've known that when you're trying to help a customer and you're trying to dig up information, it can sometimes feel a little bit like this. Where you're having to navigate through all sorts of insane things to try and get what the customer needs. Well, this simplifies it a little bit. Here we are in the Service Console, and we're looking at this on the left. It says Guided Action List. If I click on Add, here are a list of flows. And this is user access, right? This is not admin access. A user looks at this, and they can actually choose a flow, and there we go. It runs for them because they selected it from the Guided Action List. But OK, that's fine. I need to do this, but I also need a call script up at the same time. So let's pull that up. I don't have a call script, but there we go. Look at these. I can just execute a whole bunch of flows, and they're all going into their own dedicated tabs, all running simultaneously. And if I want to quit one of them, I can just remove it from here, and it goes away. And if I need to go and do something else here on the case, and I come back, I edit, I make comments, I make a post, I come back, the flow is still there with everything you need. If I close the window and I come back, it comes back because the service console, and it remembers all of the things you've been doing. So that is pretty much it for what I have today. There are some trails. We'll, of course, put the slides in. These trails are just general flow. They do cover some of the stuff we're talking about today as well. If we have any questions, I actually have one more thing I'd like to cover real quick before we go into questions, and that is that I am doing a fundraiser later today. It is for Pep Up Tech. Pep Up Tech is a great organization that benefits, well, you've probably heard about it already. You've been to all sorts of Salesforce stuff. They do all sorts of great stuff for underprivileged minority groups. And I'm doing a fundraiser today. It is in the agenda builder. You can find it. It is in Hotel Hilton Union Square at 4 o'clock. And you can donate to some money and have some fun at the same time. All right, so questions. We have a mic here, or you can just stand up and shout. Yeah.
If you have a flow on the utility bar, can you pass in the record ID using the same syntax you mentioned earlier?
Currently, no. Currently, there is no context in the utility bar unless you add it with Apex.
Thanks.
When you put a flow in an action, can you put this action on a related list, and what will it pass to the record ID?
I have not seen that this is possible yet. I've seen somebody talking about doing it, but I have not seen it actually possible. I have not been able to figure it out, so I don't believe you can right now.
On that lookup component, is there a way, can you filter the lookup results?
Not at this time.
Okay.
No, it's pretty basic.
Does the Lightning runtime, does that have any impact on headless flows or auto-launched stuff without screens?
No, it would not.
Nothing.
It would not, because it's entirely that visual layer.
It's just CSS. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So my question is that if on a quick action we call a flow, we pass on the record ID, is it possible to output the pick list value of the current record? Because that was an issue that we had to create another, we have a dynamic pick list or choice, and there were two options. So you actually had two values. It doesn't pass on the current pick list value. I'm not sure if you have faced that issue.
I haven't seen that either way.
I can show you.
Yeah, let's do that after. Let's do that after. We'll take a look.
Will flows be able to run in system context?
At the moment, it's a little bit weird. I believe they run in system context after, I believe they run in system context after you put in a wait variable.
The only way I've been able to do it is initiate a process builder, I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, oh, that's right. If you initiate it from process builder, then the flow will run in a system context. But at this time, no, there is nothing. I can't speak to roadmap. I don't actually work for the team, so okay. I'm sure they're looking into it, though. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.